Welcome back to another episode of Red Tinted Glasses with myself, Glenn Schroeder, and co-host as ever, Calum Wright. Calum, we've had a weekend off. Aberdeen haven't let us down, but we still have lots to discuss on the episode. Do you have a good weekend?
I did. The Miami Heat won their first game of the playoffs. Can't complain. So fantastic. Just disappointed now that we've got to talk about Aberdeen, but it's got to be done.
Yeah, you actually had a good weekend in terms of your other teams that you support, with Newcastle also grabbing a last-minute winner. So, yes, sorry to change your mood from being so buoyant to so despondent. I think, strangely, that kind of sums up the mood maybe ahead of this weekend's game that, I don't know, I know with myself maybe not being at the game this weekend because I'll be on a stag do, but there's not that kind of maybe general excitement ahead of our first game in the bottom six for what will be, I think, 10 years as Livingston make the trip north. I know you were speaking before we recorded about even the pricing of tickets being quite high. I think £26 for an adult in the South Stand. The club really not kind of maybe helping themselves in drawing punters to the game. Even Livingston fans can't pay at the gate, which I think is just a stupid decision. Livingston fans can only buy online up until a certain point as well. You're not exactly trying to help sell this game.
No, not at all. I mean, when they're trying to shift season tickets as well, which, to be fair, has been going surprisingly well considering the disaster of the season. So fair play to everyone who's been able to do that. But if you're trying to shift more season tickets, surely for these bottom split fixtures, not particularly appealing, make them nice and reasonably priced. Then maybe some people who wouldn't usually go might go along. If we do actually play some good football, maybe they'll be encouraged to go more regularly next season or buy a season ticket. And especially when there's two other big games in terms of Northeast football, with Bank City and Cove, both with important fixtures, and then Fraserburgh on the road as well, which will give you your time in the sun right now, Glenn. Since I had a good weekend sporting wise, so did you?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, delighted to see Fig and the rest of Fraserburgh win the Highland League for the first time in 20 years. Definitely know he had a good time celebrating this weekend. Hopefully they can give a good account of themselves at the weekend against Bonnyrigg. And again, I suppose that will then throw into question for return legs. You're speaking about big games affecting attendances at Pittodrie. That could become a potentially appealing game to people that want to take that in. But let's look at Aberdeen, Calum. Let's deep dive in. And we're recording this on Monday evening, and Monday afternoon saw the club tweet out kind of their support around the new stadium being proposed at the beach as part of the regeneration idea for that part of the city, being put forward by the council. Now, as people scramble to peel off their hashtag All for Aurora stickers from the back of their cars, it is all eyes on hashtag Team Aberdeen. That is the hashtag being used around the new stadium at the beach as the club looks to be involved in proposals around the stadium, incorporating not only a leisure centre but a new ice rink, really giving it probably a community feel to the stadium with sea views from the corporate facilities, was something that I saw in the statement as well. What, Calum, is your original or thoughts on the proposal down at the beach versus that of Kingsford?
First of all, pretty funny hashtag. I don't know where they pulled that one from, but fair enough. In terms of sort of at the beach or Kingsford, I always much prefer when a stadium's actually in the city, and not only in terms of ease of transport getting there. Right now, getting out to Kingsford would probably be a bit of a nightmare when you've got several thousand people trying to get out there. In terms of hospitality things right now, infrastructure, all that kind of thing set up. If you're looking for a day out, for a lot of people, you work the full week and then you look forward to a game at the weekend, time to catch up with your pals, your family, and make a bit of a day of it as well. It's much easier in the city centre. And I just think it's sort of where we belong. It's a stone's throw. It'd be a stone's throw from where Pittodrie is right now.
Yeah.
I just would not like to move out to this sort of soulless dome on the edge of the city, on the outskirts. It's not for me. It doesn't sit well for me. You sort of look at St Johnstone, how much of a nightmare that is to get there. The walk from the train station, if you get the train, or in terms of if you're going on a supporters bus and stopping at a pub on the way there, it's a total nightmare. And even driving is probably not ideal. I just think I'm hashtag Team Aberdeen. What about yourself? I just can't. I'm not buying into Kingsford.
I've never bought into Kingsford. I never agreed with the idea of a stadium, totally like what you're saying, being out of the city, the whole pie in the sky idea. I felt it would have been a soulless match day experience, despite how the club might have wanted to dress it up in terms of fan zones, getting people out to Kingsford early and getting bars set up. And, as much as people might like to say, I really don't think West Hill and Kingswells, the nearest two places to the stadium, have much going in terms of pre-match pubs. I know you've got the Broad Straight, there's the 4 Mile in Kingswells, but even then you've only got the Holiday Inn West that I can think of in Kingswell. So that's only really 3 places. You're kind of then limiting, and these places I'm sure could charge what they want. At least you've got, more options in the city centre. Again, I kind of agree what you're saying about, infrastructure in terms of getting to and from the games, in terms of public transport, trains, buses, all into the city centre means walking distance to the stadium is still manageable in that new location. I know people do have kind of concerns around the traffic that can often be found on King Street in the beach area, even down Guild Street, Market Street area at full time from games up to Pittodrie. But, I'd rather have that than, being out in the middle of nowhere and kind of stuck on a dual carriageway, having to be, especially if you're, bussed there and back and forth from the city centre. It's not as enjoyable. At least with a city centre stadium, you've got the option of at least walking to where you're going. I think the comparison to St Johnstone's a really excellent one. Even ourselves, when we go on the supporters bus, we stop in Cooper Angus when we're going to Perth, because it's the best place that we can get for a decent pre-match pub, because there's no really facilities in and around the ground. I know they've obviously got the Muirton suite, but again, that's limited in numbers. You can't have your whole match day crowd turning up to that suite because it would be inundated. Obviously, the club are looking to hear what your thoughts, those of you tuning in, either if it's on YouTube or via audio, to hear what your thoughts are on the new stadium proposal at the beach. So if you are in support of it, or if you do have any suggestions, make sure you do fill in that survey that is available on the club website. The club also encouraging you to get in touch with your local councillor if you are in support. But Callum, I've seen some of the debate on social media this evening around the stadium. People have seen the kind of design that was on the picture on that statement. To you, though, is it more important that we get what's actually going to be done inside the stadium, in terms of, you look at Tynecastle, get that kind of steep gradient, pack everybody in to kind of generate a bit of atmosphere in that ground? Because it does look like it's going to be enclosed, all 4 corners, and no gaps in that. But we really kind of want to get an atmosphere in that kind of bowl design that seems to have been kind of shown. We're not saying that that's what the design of the stadium is going to be. It's maybe just a picture that they've put in there. But yeah, it's more kind of what's inside. Get that kind of steep angle for the seating.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, as much as it pains me to say it, Tynecastle does have a good atmosphere, better than Pittodrie. It's probably a pretty well-known fact, but a lot of it comes from, that sort of steep stance and feeling like they're right on top of the pitch, and it generates that atmosphere. It's easier to sort of get things going when things are going their way, which is another problem we'll have to deal with, things actually going Aberdeen Football Club's way. But for me, it's much more important they get things right on the inside. If it looks nice on the outside, great, that's a bonus. But it doesn't really matter to me. As long as it's not an eyesore completely. But if it generates a great atmosphere, you're able to get behind the team and it helps improve things on the pitch, that's the most important thing for me.
Yeah, and I suppose there will be people out there that will be questioning the cost involved. I know if the council are kind of supporting it, we might see some money coming in from the council as well. But I think it's fair to say you could understand people that would have concerns around this costing a lot of money. Given, what we've seen on the pitch so far this season, we are facing a big overhaul in the squad come the summer. I think that's fair to say as well. It's fair to say there will be people that will have concerns around this news, Calum, and what effect it might have on the playing squad, or the playing budget, I should maybe say.
Very true, I suppose, especially when things aren't going our way right now as well, which you'll get into towards the back end of the episode when we come to the actual footballing side. But I suppose there is that you've got to consider too. At the same time, things have been on hold for Kingsford, having not been able to secure funding for there anyway. Maybe if the council did inject some money, they'd actually be doing something useful. Some satire there for you. Enjoy.
Yeah, who said football and politics can't mix? But maybe if the council are helping support our new stadium down at the beach, the club might find some funds to maybe get an indoor training pitch out at Cormac Park. We'll see if that ever happens. But certainly some interesting developments in terms of off the pitch to keep an eye on over the coming years and months, as I'm sure this one will rumble on. As we're all too familiar with both Loyerston and Kingsford, they didn't exactly come and go with relative short periods of time. But on to our next topic, Calum. This is the Player of the Year award. Now, we ran a poll through our Twitter account. The link to that was available also on the audio episodes and YouTube episodes. Our Twitter account, of course, if you don't follow us, is at RTG_podcast. And with just over 550 of you taking part in the vote, despite actually some intervention from this weekend's opposition in terms of the Talk Libby podcast, we did have a clear winner. And Calum, in first place, winning, for those of you watching can see, the inaugural Player of the Year trophy from the Red Tinted Glasses podcast was Ross Mccrorie. A deserved winner in your eyes, Calum?
I certainly think so. I think one of the few shining lights, perhaps, of this season. He's, no matter what position you ask him to play, and he'll deliver you a solid 8 out of 10 week in, week out. He's been very, very, very consistent for us, and I don't think anyone can begrudge him that award. Congratulations, Ross. I would, however, like to ask Glenn, is that trophy bigger than your head or not? Just for the people who are watching. About the same size.
Actually, about the same size.
If you trim the beams, I reckon it would.
Yeah. And look forward to handing that award over to Ross in person at Cormac Park. Hopefully, you might get to hear Ross's thoughts on receiving the award. Insert audio here if the club were kind enough to let us ask Ross a few questions. So Ross, how does it feel to win the award voted for by the fans on Red Tinted Glasses?
Yeah, I'll be happy, mate. Obviously been a disappointing season results wise in the position in the league table this year so far. Still got a lot of games to play, but now it's an honour just to get this award, and I appreciate it, and the support for the fans for the season, and also from all the staff at the club and the players.
Yeah, well, perfect. Thanks very much for the effort you've put in this season, and good luck for next season as well.
Thanks very much, mate. Cheers.
So with 185 votes, Ross Mccrorie is the Red Tinted Glasses Player of the Year for Aberdeen FC season 21-22. In second place with 161 votes, despite Jonathan Main's persistent campaigning that he should be winning this award, it is Lewis Ferguson, pipping Christian Ramirez by a single vote, the American number 9 coming in third with 160 votes. No real surprise that those two players find themselves in second and third, Calum. And I think when it comes to the official awards that the club are doing for the Player of the Year dinner that's being held a week on Thursday at Tekka, it would be no real surprise to see those three players in the top 3 position in that awards as well.
I certainly fully expect that to be the case. It's just a matter of working out who will be where, and could be, to be honest, probably between Mccrorie or Ferguson in terms of the 2 front runners, but I can imagine Christian Ramirez will be a close runner-up in some capacity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Talk Livy boys, well done. You managed to get Jet into 4th place with 11 votes, and Conor Barron. And Conor Barron, despite only his infrequent appearances, coming in 5th with 10 votes. and then just some singular votes for other players such as Matty Longstaff, so some Newcastle fans probably trying to hijack that. Calvin Ramsey, Jack Gurr as well. So there's clearly some people very frustrated with the performance, just trying to take the piss as well. But
protest votes.
Yes,
we'll put it down.
Congratulations to Ross Mccrorie on the award. Another close battle still remains in the Red Tinted Glasses Fantasy Football League. Ian Brown remains out in front with 1,878 points. Closely, though, behind, just 35 points, Johnny Curry in second place. And Calum, you've kind of let your guard down in recent weeks because you were winning up until a few weeks ago, sitting in third place. Of course, the winner of that league will be winning what is on display behind me, that Pittodrie print from Matthew J. Wood. I know we've had a few inquiries in our DMs of where to purchase that. We can, of course, if anyone is interested, we can send you the link. Just give us a shout in the comments on YouTube, send us a message on Instagram or, of course, Twitter, Instagram being rtg.podcast, and we'll happily provide you the link where to purchase that print. So, yes, Ian Brown in prime position to get his hands on one of them. But, of course, if you haven't used your triple captain, your bench boost, there's still 5 games to go. And one of those 5 games, Calum, is, of course, Aberdeen v Livingston this weekend at Pittodrie. Sorry, we do have to speak about the game on this episode.
Beautiful link, though, so I've got to give it to you. Not looking forward to getting stuck into this one. Not looking forward to the game at all in any capacity, but I suppose it has to be done.
It has to be done. Livingston, of course, travelling to Pittodrie for the second time this season. For the first time in what feels like a long time, I know the Top Livy boys will agree, it's not a midweek, it's a Saturday 3 p.m, so they don't need to make their 4-hour trip north. Angus, that one's especially for you, to Pittodrie in freezing conditions. But Calum, I'm sure a physical game is probably one that we can predict against Livingston, especially if the most recent encounter down the road at the Tony Mccrorie is anything to go by.
Certainly, I can imagine so. They'll be up for their battle after narrowly missing out on the top 6 on the final day, like our good selves. Them in probably more brutal fashion, has to be said, despite how brutal our football was. So they'll be probably coming back out all guns blazing, hoping to put things right to a degree, try and get back on track and secure that illustrious 7th place spot. But it will be a battle, probably most likely in that centre midfield. I mean, Jason Holt, Omiyonga, Pittman as well in there against our lot. It'll be an interesting one. It might not be pretty though. Has Aberdeen been pretty at all this season?
Well, maybe against BK Haken, but
yes,
that's
true.
A long time ago. You did say there it was maybe some brutal way that Livingston missed out on the top 6. Of course, they had their fate in their own hands. It's the way the results were kind of going until their former defender Ricky Lamy bundled the ball home to deny the Lions a top 6 berth. How do you see that, Calum, kind of impacting Livingston as they go into this clash? Because, you know, I think it's maybe fair to say they should probably be safe from the whole 11th, playoff place. Do Livingston come here looking to solidify or, put down a marker in terms of, as you said, that glorious 7th place? Or do you think they're maybe still smarting a bit from the way they missed out on top 6 football?
David Martindale and smart doesn't go hand in hand. I messed up that. I couldn't say David Martindale properly. I think nobody enjoys bottom 6 football, do they? Nobody wants to be here. But at the same time, they might be sort of looking to put down a marker perhaps in that they maybe do feel that they could have been in that top 6 and they might have a point to prove. And if it turns into a battle, I sort of maybe fancy their chances a little bit. It'll be interesting to see how we come out in this, so having just gone without a whimper, basically, into that bottom 6. I don't know. I think it will come down to just whoever works harder, whoever wants it more on the day. there's probably not even that much between the teams in terms of quality. This which hurts to say.
I was going to say, I don't know if that's disrespectful to us or Livingston just now.
I think it's maybe disrespectful to Livingston, because they could probably argue that the league table doesn't lie. They have been probably better than us this season.
Yeah, that's true. And I suppose, one of the things to kind of look at in terms of this game is the importance of the game to both sides, really. As I said, if you want to kind of hear the Livingston perspective of the game this weekend, check out the official Talk Livy podcast. You can find their episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. I join you and Rankin to kind of give an Aberdeen flavour for Livingston fans, but they, of course, do a much better deep dive into Livingston's preview than myself and Calum will. So definitely check that out on probably how they're feeling. But I know Ewan feels that if they are to lose this game on Saturday, he feels given their run of fixtures, they could still potentially be dragged in to that 10th place, 11th place playoff scenario that obviously we ourselves are also hoping to avoid. So both teams, I think, want to get off to a good start in the bottom six. So it's probably vitally important that both teams look to win the game. But again, Callum, when we talk about people looking forward to the game, getting up for the game, I just don't see myself personally where Aberdeen look like winning this game.
It is a struggle. I mean, Livingston not being on particularly great form. Likewise, us both missing out on the final day before the split. It's gonna be a tough one. It's gonna be a real battle, I feel like, but they've got to get themselves up for it. Both sides really. I suppose the only thing I think of is the way that they missed out is that's why they might have a little bit of fire in their bellies, whereas we've just been absolutely awful all season, and sort of there is that sort of apathy now, certainly from my perspective, where it's like, it's bottom six, let's just get it over with and get this season done kind of thing. And I hope that the players aren't feeling that way. Maybe they have, points to prove, maybe places to secure a contract next season, or, but it'll be an interesting one, if not an enjoyable one, I feel.
Yeah, and I suppose one of the words or quotes you kind of used there, fire in the belly, it's not really something we've kind of seen from Aberdeen. Well, I was going to say at all, but I was going to say not a lot to try and sound polite. But, Livingston, I don't know if this is going to sound disrespectful or not, but they probably do have that fire in their belly and are probably prepared to roll their sleeves up and fight for 3 points. And just that Ross County game for me just doesn't give me any encouragement that this team, this Aberdeen team, just to clarify, has that desire to roll up their sleeves and fight for 3 points. And, if I'm saying that the Livingston boys are worried that if they lose this game, they could get dragged into it, we should be just as worried. St Mirren, of course, level on points with us. They play a struggling Hibernian this weekend. And St Johnstone, obviously, they've got their massive Tayside derby against Dundee. It's quite possible if results don't go in our favour. Callum, I know they've been going in our favour for certainly a good few weeks. We just haven't been able to take advantage of it. But if results finally go against us, we're very much facing a home game against Dundee, looking over our shoulders all of a sudden.
We are, and it's very, very worrying. St Johnstone haven't been so bad in recent weeks. Obviously, they did get absolutely destroyed by Celtic 7-0. But they've been not so bad. And if they can sort of stay in it with a few more games to go, they'll be fancying their chances. And you mentioned having rolled up our sleeves. A lot of the times this season, I feel like they have turned up and sort of expected to win and not rolled up their sleeves and got dirty and done the dirty work to win the games. And the two that stick out in my mind, especially, are games against Motherwell, where maybe arguably the better side created plenty of chances, but Motherwell hung in there, did the dirty work and took theirs. And too many times we've not done that and sort of expected that things are going to go our way, and they've just not. It certainly is a concern if we don't get off to a winning start in this post-split fixtures, especially with, as mentioned, the fixtures going on elsewhere. Worrying times, weirdly worrying.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to that point you make about, creating chances in a little bit. But in terms of Livingston, who do you feel, based on kind of the games that we've played against Livingston so far this season, that we should kind of be maybe keep an eye on? You've got your worries around. I know you said, I think you're probably meaning Aberdeen players when you said people fighting for contracts or maybe trying to impress. But certainly from a Livingston point of view, I suppose you've also got Alan Forrest, who's had pre-contract talks with Hearts. Don't know your thoughts on if he would maybe fit Aberdeen or not. But again, a player, we spoke about Danny Mullen before Dundee, a player looking to impress. He scored against us. Yeah, but of course, Bruce Anderson, if he is fit, probably coming up as ever when he comes up against Aberdeen as he's done this season, looking to prove a point. And then, you already highlighted Jason Holt. The other one that kind of sticks out to me from the games we've played against them is Odin Bailey. The kind of pace that he's had and the directness has caused us problems this season. And you look at what happened in the last 10 minutes against Ross County when Joseph Hungbo and Regan Charles Cook started running at our defence, and we were running away from them, and eventually what led to the penalty. So probably those three, along with Stefan Omiyonga, if he's playing in terms of forward players, are players definitely to look out for. But is there anybody from your side that you've kind of got your eye on that might cause us a few problems?
Well, obviously, all those players mentioned, Omiyonga was very, very good against us, certainly down the road. They bossed in the middle of the park. Christian Montano as well, I think, caused us a fair few problems. And they do have got the squad up. They do have decent players in there that can cause us a lot of problems. The three in the middle of the park, especially, if they get on top of the game and they know things are going their way, they are hard to put off their game. Omiyonga, Pittman, and Jason Holt there, who don't like Jason Holt in any way, shape or form. But if you just want a sort of a grafter in the middle of the park, very, very decent at this level. And hard work goes a long, long way in this league. And he's maybe one of the hardest workers in there, which is very, very painful to admit.
Yeah, and frustratingly unbookable. Shout out to the ABZ podcast guys who very much enjoy that. Well, I don't think they enjoy the fact that he's unbookable. But yeah, it always seems to be so interesting to see if he picks up a yellow card this weekend. But as I said, if you do want a more in-depth Livingston perspective of the game this weekend, make sure to check out the Talk Livy podcast. We will, of course, retweet it from our Twitter page ahead of our episode coming out this week, but make sure you check them out, obviously, once you finish listening to this episode. Callum, what can Aberdeen do, though, to change our fortunes? We discussed this before we went live, if you want to call it. We started recording this episode anyway. That against Ross County, we both, maybe apart from Ojo starting over Calvin Ramsey, was probably our strongest starting 11 out there, and we didn't really cover ourselves in glory. So what can we do, Jim Goodwin do, to change our fortunes?
Well, we probably could have played until midnight and still not have scored against Ross County. I'd expect Calvin Ramsey to come back in probably now. In terms of what we can do, get the ball to Marley Watkins, in my opinion. Obviously, if fit, having only played an hour, much to my dismay, against Ross County, but having had time off on the international break, hopefully he is fit to go for an hour. Have you got your hand up, Glenn?
Yeah, but did you think in that hour against Ross County that he looked fit?
I thought he looks good. I thought he looks good out there. In terms of getting the ball sort of in between the midfield and Christian Ramirez, I thought he was sort of one of the main driving forces in there. I know you don't maybe agree, but that was my opinion from how I saw it. So shove it. I don't know if he did look fit, but it's certainly concerned if he's not up to speed by now, having started getting some minutes under his belt. He's not played over the weekend, more minutes in training as well. He should be good to go by now. I'm no doctor. I don't know. But I feel like he should be good to go by now. Am I totally misinformed opinion or not informed at all?
Yeah. I suppose, though, in terms of Marley Watkins, then, if he is still having his game time managed, his fitness managed, that does concern me greatly, because it's one less kind of attacking player, one player that certainly can cause the opposition problems, as we've seen this season in spells. It then kind of puts a reliance on our other attacking players, and that would be Conor McLennan and Vicente Bissauin. And how much pressure that's, I know we bring up a lot around Vicente Bissauin, a player that's learning the Scottish football. He's also young, so is Conor McLennan, despite the number of appearances. He's into three figures in terms of appearances for Aberdeen. But it puts pressure on these players to then step up to the mark and perform. And unfortunately, you might think this is harsh around Vicente, but I don't think either have performed consistently enough to kind of be able to burden that weight if Marley Watkins can't pull his own weight as well.
They haven't. I think that is probably fair to say. And certainly with having lost Ryan Hedges as well, they really needed to do more in this season. Vicente Bissauin, I'll continue making excuses for him in that he is adjusting to league. He is very young. To sort of pin our hopes maybe on making that top six, on sort of him without Marley Watkins and things, was maybe a bad idea on my part. But hopefully, perhaps now without that pressure, maybe we'll see a little bit more of his flair, less of his play acting, I believe you called it beforehand, Glenn. Yeah,
it was only because I was listening to the ABZ guys, and shout out to them for awarding us, well, I say them, I mean their listeners, for awarding us Podcast of the Year. We duly accept that award, so thank you very much to those that voted for us in that. But there was a point that, and I can't remember who it was, I think it was Gavin that made it, about there was an incident, and I totally forgot it until he referenced it in their episode, during that Ross County game, where I think Bissauin went down really easily under a tackle, and he seemed to, roll about, and it was almost, and I remember it because it then started a Ross County counter-attack, and I just remember getting so wound up and shouting at him to get up and stop just trying to expect to buy a free kick. Now, we spoke about his diving against Dundee. Now, Livingston was probably the first time, well, I remember we called it shithousery at the time, where there was that incident, I think it was with Montano, where there was a slight shove and Bissauin went down very easily, and led to Montano being sent off. But, when these games, if we're going to be in a battle and, we're not exactly, 0-0, for example, I don't want to see him rolling around for a couple of minutes when, especially if he's not hurt, just get up and get on with the game.
Unless you try to win a penalty, in which case, all for it. I do see where you're coming from. I suppose it's something that'll probably just come with a bit more experience, especially playing in this league, that maybe he won't get away with it this much. He has to maybe be aware that he might have a marked card, both with sort of opposition players and then officials as well. Something he has to sort of probably get out of his game as an example. Much I did love the shithousery once upon a time, and him bouncing up to celebrate after Ross Mccrorie scored against Dundee. I did love that, but realistically, he does have to sort of knock it out of his game a little bit more. There's very top players who do the exact same thing, but in terms of in the Scottish Premiership, it probably just won't fly, and he'll probably need to learn fast.
But as you know, you're right. He'll learn, and he'll get his card marked very quickly by officials if this becomes a recurring theme. But we've seen the good of Vicente this season, despite people maybe think I'm not maybe being too critical of him. No, we'll not use the word hate. But his goal against Hibernian was, it was an exquisite team goal, but it was also an excellent finish. Oh, yeah. We've also seen in flashes some of the skill he can use in terms of getting the team up the pitch. But as I said, I personally, and as you said, you're entitled to your opinion. So if people disagree with this, to quote Calum, shove it. We have seen the good of Vicente Bissauin in terms of goal scoring, but in terms of going forward, I just don't think we see it consistently enough. And, something we spoke about on that last episode in terms of missing Ryan Hedges. Ryan Hedges did a lot of defensive work as well as going forward. And maybe with both Vicente, Conor McLennan, we kind of missed that kind of tracking back, and that's maybe exposed us slightly defensively as well.
I think so, especially when Watkins is in there as well, because he is a grafter, to be fair, until he basically runs until he's injured. That's basically Marley Watkins' stick. There was at one point I noticed during the Ross County game, I remember he just sort of let his runner go and then eventually started tracking him once the guy was already like 3-4 yards ahead of him, and by that point you're not going to catch him. It was frustrating. Again, maybe it's something he'll learn a bit more with experience. It'll get drilled into him by Jim Goodwin, I'm sure, eventually. I hope it doesn't cost us too much between now and then. At the same time, in terms of him going forward, I don't know, I'm maybe expecting too much in terms of consistency now. So I'm just sort of hoping that sort of pressure maybe is off his shoulders a little bit now that we're at the bottom six, which is obviously terrible. But maybe he can play a bit more freely between now and the end of the season.
But I suppose an argument to that is there going to be pressure off of him because, if results don't go our way, there's suddenly pressure on your flair players, your wide players to start becoming involved and creating goals. Which we're going to come on to very quickly. But whether you think we're being harsh, whether you think our points are fair, I think, Calum, it's really fair to say this goes back to that January transfer window. I know Vicente was an addition in January, but we've left ourselves short in terms of creativity in this team.
Absolutely. We've mentioned it time and time again. I'm sure it'll be another apparent problem in weeks to come too. We're probably 2 forward players short, at least, in terms of that. And that's probably also why some of the pressure is on Bisawa, and maybe we expect a bit more consistency and things like that, because we need it. We don't have any other alternatives, which is unfortunate, other than obviously Conor McLennan, the most bizarre football player to have graced the earth.
Yeah. I saw somebody saying, would we have maybe picked up an extra couple of points if we'd held on to Niall McGinn for the remainder of the season? And I suppose it's certainly a theory that people will debate, and maybe we can do that another time. But in terms of, as you said, we've maybe been left a couple of players short. That takes us to that forward area where we've got Christian Ramirez, who looks not just out of form, but out of sorts. And that Ross County game kind of more so evident of that, as the, striker who's probably kept us further away from danger than we could have been had he not scored as many goals as he had this season, is struggling to find the back of the net. And this is where I want to kind of go back to the point you made earlier in the episode, Calum, about kind of being clinical and creating chances. You look at a lot of Aberdeen games recently, we're creating lots of shots high into the double figures, sometimes even verging on hitting 20 shots. But, we're hardly keeping any on target. And yet the opposition, only need a handful of shots, a couple on target, and they find a goal. So I think it's imperative that starting this weekend, we become more clinical in front of goal. And I suppose that's got to start with your striker in Christian Ramirez.
Certainly, he looks like a man sort of checked out, perhaps you could say, if some rumours are to be believed. And also just a man bereft of confidence, really, as well. We have said it before, though, at times the service to him just absolutely appalling, if existent whatsoever. There is my sympathies for him, 100%. But at the same time, he just sometimes looks, as I said, out of sorts, and like the movement's lacking a little bit. And now at times the chances aren't even falling to him recently. In fact, I can't even think of that many that he's missed. And I think it was Alan Shearer, the great man, once said, you shouldn't be worried when you're missing the chances, you'd be worrying when the chances aren't coming. And that's sort of the case now, really.
Yeah, I guess. And I suppose you could argue that there hasn't been exactly much created for him. But I suppose if worst case scenario, some people maybe say, might be thinking it might be a blessing in disguise. If he was to pick up an injury between now and the end of the season, we'll be left. I'm just saying, don't look at me like that. I'm just saying we'd be left with Michael Ruth to lead the line, the player who I think has only had like 3 minutes first team football this season for Aberdeen. A player that, to all of us at Premiership level anyway, is untested and untried. And again, when you're only 6 points above the playoff places, you are going to be concerned that where are the goals coming from for Aberdeen?
Absolutely. And it's not great when that's sort of the player you've got to turn to. No disrespect to him, he's just sort of untested. And as I said, he's basically an unknown quantity. We don't really know that much about him because we've not seen him. Yeah. I think I've watched one game in which he's actually started in. I think it was Arbroath versus Hearts last season. So if he'll do for Dick Campbell, he'll do for me. But it's not great that's what you rely on. Maybe we'll see a little bit more of him now. In the bottom 6, I suppose, especially if towards the sort of the last 2-3 games, it's sort of just we're going to finish somewhere. It doesn't matter now.
I suppose on that then was kind of a point I wanted to bring up about, will there be any fringe players? Jack Milne's been on the bench recently and not seen game time. Although, when I've seen him this season playing for Brecon City, played in midfield, I know the club want to kind of mould him into a centre-back, given he's 6'4". But do you see any of these kind of fringe players getting any game time? Because for me, I think there's still too much risk. It wouldn't be, as you kind of allude to there, Callum, until we're mathematically safe from any sort of playoff, maybe just have to accept 9th place once we're mathematically safe, 9th, 10th place. And then you do give those youngsters a chance to see what they've got, because it would certainly get me excited maybe to see what these guys can do. Certainly.
I know you're probably not calling for them to start games, but certainly get chances off the bench. So I would certainly like to see that. I think Jim Goodwin said that now's not a time for sort of trying new things.
Yeah, and I agree with that.
I suppose I agree with that as well. But once it comes to sort of we're mathematically safe and we can afford to give these guys 10, 15, 20 minutes at the end of games, I would be absolutely all for it. But I suppose you still then have to think, although the difference between 7th and 9th to us, or 10th even, it doesn't really make too much difference other than potential embarrassment, I suppose. There's still the financial aspect as well, which when we're not going to be playing European football, a couple £100,000 could go a pretty long way. As you said, could pay for a Charles Dunn. So there we are. I suppose that's that considered.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. And I suppose when we're speaking about fringe players, I suppose we also have to wonder where the Andy Considine Swan Song appearance fits in there between now and the end of the season.
If it's when I'm away in Budapest, I will be bloody livid, I tell you that much.
No, he'll. I think we won't see him until the very last game of the season, and he'll be involved at some point, and then that's my guess. We've kind of looked at the midfield into certainly more of the wide players, and we've looked up top. I think it's fair to say, Calum, we're pretty happy with the middle three in Mccrorie, Ferguson and Barron, despite last week definitely probably being the poorest performance from that midfield three. It's just for whatever reason it didn't click, and obviously we saw Mccrorie subbed at the hour mark. Defensively though, ahead of this game at the weekend, do you have any kind of concerns? Would you be changing up that defence? I think it's fairly obvious that if anyone does have any thoughts, it would just be that bringing Calvin Ramsey in for Funso Ojo.
I think that will be the case. I can't imagine there'll be too much chopping and changing. I certainly hope there's not. Anyway, it's sort of been set, and then Calvin Ramsey's dropped out. I presume that'll just be the only change coming back, and I don't have too many concerns about it either. I've been concerned about our defence all the way throughout the season, but regardless, now is probably not the time to go and start experimenting.
Yeah, I know that this week Liverpool have apparently been rumoured or certainly linked to Calvin Ramsey. So hopefully, if that information is true. We haven't seen any leaks from Pittodrie this week so far. We'll see if that's We'll see if that has turned Calvin's head. But in terms of kind of the goals we've been conceding, the Dundee game, the Ross County was a penalty that probably shouldn't have been a penalty on reflection, but they weren't, for me, individual defensive mistakes. They were more kind of collective team mistakes. Certainly the Dundee game in particular. How do you feel, Calum, that Declan Gallagher's David Bates partnership is forming? I was going to say flourishing, but I think that might be a bit premature.
I think that would be a bit premature. My thoughts right now is basically it'll do. I don't really have any other option unless we're bringing Andy Considine, I suppose. Exactly, which I am all for. But it has looked a lot better, I suppose, in recent weeks. There's not been too many calamities, which is really not what we should be measuring things on. But unfortunately, that is where we are right now. It has looked a little bit better, and I can't see it changing really between now and season, as I say, until Andy Considine does come in there. It'll be interesting next season, however, if they're even here, let alone if they're still playing together.
I agree on that sentiment. So kind of looked at everything from an Aberdeen perspective as we look towards the game this weekend, Aberdeen versus Livingston at Pittodrie, a Saturday 3 p.m. kickoff. As we've said, Calum, confident that we will pick up 3 points based on everything that we've chatted about and start our bottom six campaign positively, or not?
I'm not sure if confident is the word. Hopeful probably is more what I'm leaning towards. We've got the team capable to do it, certainly. It's at home, which is obviously a massive advantage for us this season. But at the same time, I've now finally learned just don't expect anything with this slot.
Expect the unexpected. I think it's fair to say. But no, that is our preview for the weekend's game. We will be back next week, looking back at the events that have unfolded at Pittodrie and looking towards the game against Dundee, which of course, results dependent, could be the opportunity to relegate Mark McGee. We will see how things develop. Hopefully we've not dragged ourselves or been dragged closer to the relegation mire. But Calum, enjoy the game this weekend and look forward to catching up with you to talk through what has occurred next week.
Thank you very much. Enjoy your stagger. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to leave a like on the video if you've enjoyed it. Subscribe with notifications on and follow us wherever you're tuning in, as well as on Twitter and on Instagram too. Thanks very much. Come on, you Reds.